This is Johnny. I want to welcome you to Night Signals. Do you ever go to a particular boomer hangout called Next Door? Because it is a boomer hangout. Boomer hangout and maybe failed Gen Xers who wish they could be boomers. Maybe your Ted Cruz's. I mean, just the worst of the worst when it comes to Gen X. But really, I'm going to call it, boomer bitch session is what Next Door is. But it gives you kind of a idea of what's going on with that generation. I don't know that we needed the reminder, because they never seem to really change, do they? Next Door will certainly teach you that. You go on there, the idea is that you can connect with your neighbors, your neighborhood. And there are actual neighborhoods these days, believe it or not. You kind of have to not be in the middle of these kind of soulless suburbs where everyone is just inside all day on their devices. But there are actual neighborhoods. In fact, I live in one. I didn't always, but I do now. Have for a few years. And when I say neighborhood, I mean people walk by and they talk to you, and as long as you're out there, you talk back. Maybe you're like I am. I was born in Seattle, raised in Seattle, am Seattle. And in Seattle, you don't care who your neighbors are, usually. I mean, I do, because I have a tendency, I don't know, for some reason, when I went to rent homes, which is what I had to do, is rent. I don't even think you can rent homes in Seattle anymore. Or at least not the way that I was about 20 years ago. But I had a tendency to rent homes from older women, and the people who lived next to me tended to be older women, single women usually. In fact, always. When I mean older women, I'm talking about women in their 70s and their 80s who lived by themselves and had been there since maybe the 60s, maybe even earlier, back when you could afford a place like that. Not as a rental, but as an owner. So, you can't really get that in Seattle anymore, not as a renter. Or if you are a renter, I mean, you're paying a lot to rent in Seattle. Much more than it would cost to buy elsewhere. And I wouldn't call them neighborhoods either. In Seattle, I mean, it's, there isn't really a sense of community. I did live in various places in Seattle, notably West Seattle, North Seattle. And I wouldn't call anywhere I lived even though they had the appearance of what maybe used to be in the early 90s and before. But there weren't really kids walking around on their bikes, hanging out. Mostly it was a row and another row, another row of mostly quiet, empty streets, besides the commuters coming and going from work. Which I wouldn't really call a neighborhood. I mean, grew up in the 70s and 80s, as I talked about. And back then, compared to today, it would seem like there was just a bunch of feral children running around, which is kind of what we were. The idea of, if it wasn't school time, you took off in the morning, you headed off to your friends, hung out there, drank from garden hoses. Only Gen X knows, in a deep sense, what water from a garden hose tastes like. I'm assuming you Zoomers do not know. And you certainly don't know about that first unpleasant experience of being the one who turned the water on in the middle of the summer and took the drink and just about got your face burned off from that water that had been sitting in that hose. Fortunately, we didn't hear about any brain-eating amoebas in those days. Hopefully there weren't any, and it wasn't just something that was missed. I'm not saying that was better, at least that aspect. But back then, in the 80s, the kids were out, and there weren't devices. Your device was your bike, or your slingshot, or your yo-yo, or whatever it is that you had as you're walking around the block, walking around the neighborhood with your friends, having adventures. There are good things about that and certainly bad things about that, but if you're anywhere near a city core or in one of these sort of soulless suburbs, that experience is largely gone. I moved out of Seattle some years ago because of the rent, and I bought a house in a coastal area, a small town area. And when I found the place that I wanted to live, or me and my partner wanted to live in, it was because not only was it historic, in fact, most of the places we lived in Seattle were houses that had been around since the early 20th century, Victorian. We like that. We like old things. We like architecture and artistry craftsmanship that was made to have both form and function, to have both beauty and utility. Stuff that was made before everything became plastic and mass-produced. And if you have been around that stuff, or you know people who have homes like that and they've respected how it was made, you probably have gotten the feeling yourself of, this is different. Why is this place so unique? That's what me and my partner like. And in fact, I seem to be leaning into it the older I get, and I am getting old. At least compared to my frame of reference when I was in my 20s and 30s. When you get into your 50s, you start experiencing things a little differently. And you know that you're getting old. So this Seattle boy goes to a small town because there's a historic district that is quite charming, quite enchanting. And I realized when I was walking around the neighborhood and getting an idea of the feeling of the people, that I didn't want to be Seattle Johnny anymore. Not here. You don't move into a place with this much history and not respect the culture around it. And so I decided, well, you know what? For the first time, I'm going to be approachable, and I'm going to be out there when I'm working in my yard, working on my house, my garden, beautifying, that I'm going to be neighborly. And that's how people are in small towns, and it's a good thing. You should try it sometime. However, whether you are in a small town or the soulless suburbs of Seattle, Portland. When I say soulless, I mean you can't really usually say you live in a neighborhood, right? You need a small town for that. Anyways, regardless of what physical circumstance you find yourself in, there's always next door. And it seems that no matter where you live, next door is pretty much the same, isn't it? Have you been there? It's a bunch of boomers bitching about boomer shit. That's the long and short of next door. It can really drive you crazy if you aren't a boomer. But anyways, the point of bringing up this entire topic is what I saw the other day. Because of course as next door and as a sort of a boomer safe space, kinda, it tends and it trends towards the conservative. Not just conservative, but the grievance conservative. Towards the people who never quite got over the satanic panic. The idea that recreational drugs are some sort of a blight upon society. Now I've got a boomer neighbor. I mean, most of my neighbors are boomers. I'm in my early 50s, but for my neighborhood, I'm going to say I'm on the young side. I have one neighbor, and I know all my neighbors. I speak to all my neighbors. You know, we say how do you do, and how are you, and what's been going on, and your house is looking stellar today, sir. I enjoy it. I mean, it's great. However, these are boomers, and I have a specific boomer neighbor who I do hang out with quite a bit, because he's out there and I'm out there, and he says, "Hey, Johnny, how's it going?" And we shoot the shit and we chit chat. But the other day, and I do care about, I mean, I do watch Next Door because it is people talking about what's going on in your neighborhood. And the other day when I was on there, I noticed that there was a post by that particular neighbor. And I had kind of had the idea that he was a Trump supporter. I didn't get huge mega vibes from him. He's a vet. It's old, 80s. But I feel like he was, watching Fox News all day, talking about how much he hates the liberals. I didn't really get quite that feeling. And interestingly, that was kind of borne out by what his post entailed. He was reflecting on Trump's latest speech. Might have been the State of the Union. I think it was a State of the Union. And interestingly, he said, he really appreciated what he had to say, but that Trump could have laid off on the jabs at Obama. And as I read through his post, I see that he was an Obama supporter. In fact, he voted for Obama and he voted for Trump. Now, if you voted for Obama and you voted for Trump, you just can't be a too far gone MAGA person. It's just not possible. You can be a misled person. You can be a conservative boomer. But you can't be part of the MAGA cult and have voted for Obama and Donald Trump. And so I got kind of intrigued. I'm like, what is going on here? And as I read further, I got an idea of what was going on there. He supports Trump. He's a veteran, as many of his era are. And he also supports the invasion, the assassination, and the aggression against Iran. Why does he support it? Apparently because they're ruled by a dictator. So he's all for it. This is a fine way to conduct one's country. If you think a country has a dictator, then you should support that dictator's assassination by another country, the bombing, the invasion, the war. Now, I understand that your common MAGA Donald Trump supporter is going to be in favor of whatever he does. So it didn't surprise me that he supported the invasion and aggression against Iran. What, I don't want to say it surprised me, but what struck me was what he said next. Because he went from the international, went right past the national, came right down to the local. And he went right in on what you, if you are familiar with the goings on next door, is quite familiar. And that is complaining about the crime, the degradation, and especially the homeless population in their area. You know, I still use homeless. Apparently there's with what do you call them? People experiencing homelessness, or there's another one. Unhoused, I guess, is the new one. My biggest issue with all of these is I don't understand why homeless has a stigma on it. When I think of homeless, I don't think bad. I don't think dangerous. I think population that has not been properly served by our society. And so my guess is, my guess is the stigma comes from these boomers, these people in the next door, stigmatizing people who are unhoused, people who are experiencing homelessness, people who are homeless. And the thing that struck me was that he was talking about their drug use and their breaking of the law and of their thwarting of law enforcement. I think he was also complaining about how the city or the county had allocated more emergency medical resources. And in his mind, this meant, quote, druggies, end quote, were being prioritized over normal citizens who are paying for these services. I think he mentioned the behavior of some of these homeless people, illegal behavior, as abhorrent to him. What really struck me is, as he was ranting and raving about his grievance with them, their place in society, he used a phrase. And the phrase was, "Law is law." Are you catching the same thing I am? I assume you are. Law is law. People should obey the law. The law matters. This from the person who just said he supported the aggression against a foreign nation who was not attacking us, who posed no threat to us. And we assassinated their leader. He didn't say because they were breaking the law. He said because they had a dictator. They had a dictator running the country. Now this guy's a veteran. And a post-World War II veteran at that. I assume that he was, around, he was serving around the time of Vietnam. This was long after the Nuremberg Tribunal. This is long after the Geneva Conventions. This is long after the formation of the United Nations, in which we signed a treaty called the UN Charter. Law is law. The UN Charter says that the crime of aggression is the supreme war crime. And what they mean by aggression is, if you attack somebody who wasn't attacking you, you're committing aggression, or attacking one of your enemy or one of your allies. If you attack somebody who wasn't attacking anybody, you've committed the war crime of aggression. And the interesting thing about the war crime of aggression in the UN Charter is that it is described and defined as the supreme war crime because it differs from other war crimes. It differs from any other war crime because everything that happens as a result of it is part and parcel of the initial war crime of aggression. Law is law. What about the supreme law of the land, our treaties? This is I think they call it cognitive dissonance. It's a very popular buzzword against people on the internet these days. The idea that you are holding two contradictory beliefs at the same time and believing in both of them. And the dissonance is the unpleasant feelings, emotions, the state of mind that arises from believing two opposing, contradictory ideas at the same time. I support the invasion of Iran. Within 1 week, a girls' school, 12 and under, was bombed. 180 little girls were massacred by a Tomahawk missile from the United States of America. Not Israel. They were doing their own war crimes at the same time, at the same place. But only the United States has Tomahawk missiles. We did that. Trump built that. We assassinated the leader of a foreign country, and that country was not attacking us. State sponsor of terrorism. Is that the answer that the conservatives who are still trying to hold on to some shred of an honorable viewpoint are saying? There's no honor in that. The United States supports Israel. Israel committed a genocide and is still committing it in Gaza. They are bombing paramedics in Lebanon. They've been doing this for as long as I've been alive, guys. They are the biggest, aside from the United States, terrorist state in that region. We support Saudi Arabia. We still do, because of their oil. How many 9/11 terrorists were Saudi Arabian? I'll give you a approximation, about 80% of them. State sponsor of terrorism? No. The reason that they made the rule at the Nuremberg, at the principles at the United Nations Charter about aggression being the supreme war crime is to enshrine and codify the idea that and sorry, Sam Harris, to destroy your entire raison d'etre. The entire point of the United Nations Charter and the supreme war crime of war, aggression, is based on the idea that intentions, motives, reasons for doing it are irrelevant. It does not matter what the motives are. And why would that be? That's because every invasion, almost without fail, you could certainly say over 90%, probably more like 99.9% of invasions in recorded history claimed that they had good motives, including Nazi Germany, including Imperial Japan. Everybody has good motives. If that's your litmus test, then everybody is justified in aggression. The problem with that, Sam, and every other loser follower apologizing for massive war crimes, is that they didn't make that distinction because of warm, fuzzy feelings in their hearts of, you shouldn't do that. Do you know why they made the rules precisely that way? Yeah, it wasn't because of high-minded principles of, hey guys, the Enlightenment thinkers thought something about the inherent rights of human beings and we shouldn't be doing this anymore. No, it's because 60 million people died in World War II. That's why it happened. Because that was World War II, and they were like, what is World War III going to look like? The United States dropped a couple nuclear weapons at the end of World War II. They looked at that and they said, World War III is going to be the end of Europe's war games. That's why they made it. Because they knew World War III was going to be the end. You been watching Fallout lately? I guess the Amazon series. That is a romanticized idea of a post-nuclear, post-apocalypse. That's why they made the UN Charter. Because World War III, they were pretty sure, was going to be the end. Hence they wrote, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of the nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom, to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples. Have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers, found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations, and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations." That's why they made it. And we signed it. The United Nations Charter that we signed is a treaty, and according to the Constitution, a treaty that we sign is the supreme law of the land. Law is law. You can't consent to a breach of the supreme war crime of aggression, and then claim that law is law. However, apparently if you're a boomer, you can. What are we going to do with these people? Because the guy who supported Barack Obama and went on to support Donald Trump, he's fine with starting World War III. But God forbid a homeless person, a unhoused person, a person experiencing homelessness, how dare they flip off a cop? Let us find a way to move forward into a society that believes that if we make laws, that if we agree that something should be against the law, that the law is the law. Because these boomers don't really believe that. So call them on their bullshit. We can wait till they're gone, and it won't be that long. But I can't wait personally. The world can't wait. We certainly don't want to wait until World War III to agree together that the law is the law. This is Johnny, and I'm your night signal.